On the far bank, a lioness and her two small cubs had come to drink. The cubs, barely 3 months old, trotted beside their mother, their steps clumsy in the damp sand. It was a rare cool morning after a long stretch of dry heat, and the smell of wet grass filled the air. The lioness, lean and strong, scanned the horizon before lowering her head to drink. Her reflection rippled gently on the surface, framed by the reeds. The cubs mimicked her, leaning forward, their tiny pink tongues dipping into the edge of the river. But a few meters away, something moved, slow, subtle, invisible but immense. A pair of yellow eyes broke the surface for a second, then vanished. A crocodile, nearly 15 feet long, glided just beneath the water, its scales glinting faintly. It had been waiting all morning, motionless, patient as stone. The river seemed still again. Only the faint splash of the cubs drinking disturbed the peace. Then, suddenly, the stillness shattered. With explosive speed, the crocodile lunged from the water, its massive jaws open wide. The sound of the impact echoed across the plain, a violent burst of water, sand, and roaring air. The lioness reacted instantly. She spun, her body twisting between the reptile and her cubs. One cub managed to scramble back, tripping over its own paws. The other, the smaller of the two, was caught. The crocodile's jaws clamped around its back leg, dragging it toward the river with terrifying strength. The lioness roared, the sound sharp and raw. It wasn't just aggression, it was the sound of life refusing to surrender. She leapt, claws extended, landing squarely on the crocodile's back. Mud and water exploded around them. The battle began. The crocodile thrashed violently, rolling and twisting, trying to drag both victims under. The lioness slashed at its eyes, her claws tearing through tough scales. She bit down on the back of its neck, snarling through splashes and foam. The cub screamed, a high-pitched, piercing cry that carried across the water. For several seconds, the struggle was chaos, a blur of teeth, claws, and splintering force. Each movement of the crocodile's tail sent waves crashing over them, pounding the muddy bank. The lioness dug her hind claws into the sand, anchoring herself. The croc turned, dragging her deeper into the shallows. She refused to let go. Her jaws locked tighter, muscles straining. Blood, mud, and water mixed in a dark cloud around them. The cub's legs slipped free for a moment, but the river pulled it sideways, sucking it toward the deeper channel. With one final surge, the lioness released the crocodile and lunged for her cub. Her jaws snapped around its scruff just as another wave broke over them. The crocodile lunged again, but too late. The lioness pulled her cub out of the water, staggering backward up the bank. She turned, drenched and panting, the cub still hanging limp in her jaws. The crocodile thrashed once more, jaws snapping at empty air, then sank slowly back into the depths. Only ripples and red-stained foam marked where it had been. The lioness set the cub down gently on the dry sand. The tiny body trembled, alive, but bleeding from the leg. Its cries were weak now, almost soundless. The other cub pressed against its mother's side. Watching, the lioness bent down, licking the wound, her rough tongue cleaning the blood with slow, rhythmic strokes. The cub's breathing steadied a little, the tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. Overhead, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the riverbank. The silence that followed was heavy, not peace, but exhaustion. On the opposite bank, a herd of impalas had stopped grazing, heads raised, watching. A pair of egrets fluttered above the water, circling once before landing nearby. The savanna itself seemed to pause, suspended in the aftermath of violence. The lioness laid down beside her cubs. Mud clung to her fur, her flanks heaving. The rescued cub shifted closer, resting its head on her foreleg. She closed her eyes briefly, her ears flicking at the faint sounds of wind and insects. The river flowed on, quietly reclaiming its calm. But the quiet wouldn't last. From the far distance came a low, rolling roar, deep, powerful, unmistakable. The lioness's head lifted. The sound came again, closer this time. Her ears turned toward the north. The cubs looked up, confused. Another roar answered, this one younger, sharper, followed by the distant thud of paws on dry earth. The pride was returning, within minutes. The shapes appeared over the ridge, 3 lionesses and a dominant male, moving in formation. They had been hunting earlier, drawn back by the echoes of battle that had carried across the plains. The lead lioness was older, her golden coat darker along the spine. She approached first, her nose lifted, scenting the air. When she reached the riverbank and saw the mud-streaked mother with her cubs, she paused. The male followed, his mane rippling in the breeze. His stride slow but commanding. The injured cub whimpered softly. The older lioness stepped forward, sniffed the air near the wounded cub, and let out a low growl, not of threat, but recognition. The pride began to gather around them, forming a circle. The male lowered his head, examining the scene, the blood-stained sand, the scent of reptile still lingering. He gave a low, rumbling call, deep in his chest, then lay down beside them. The younger lionesses approached the cubs, grooming them gently, their tongues cleaning the remaining mud. The rescued cub flinched at first, then relaxed, nestling into the warmth of its family. The mother lioness, still breathing hard, lay motionless, her gaze fixed on the water. Every sound of the river made her muscles tighten. Then, unexpectedly, the older lioness stepped beside her. She pressed her head lightly against the mother's shoulder, a gesture rare among lions outside of greeting. It was brief but unmistakable, reassurance, solidarity. The moment broke whatever remained of tension. The pride settled. The cubs crawled between the adults, finding safety in the mass of golden bodies. The sun was lowering now, turning the river amber. A soft wind rippled through the reeds, carrying the smell of wet earth and life. From the opposite bank, the crocodile's eyes surfaced once more, a pair of yellow slits above the waterline, silent, waiting. But the lions ignored it. The balance had been restored as the pride rested together. A herd of elephants crossed in the distance, their reflections moving slowly through the shallow pools. The sound of their footsteps was faint, steady, ancient. The lioness, her body streaked with drying mud, finally closed her eyes. Her cubs pressed close against her chest. She had fought and won, but at a cost visible in every labored breath. Beside her, the older lioness kept watch. Every now and then, she would glance at the wounded cub, ensuring its small chest still moved. The sun sank lower, bleeding red light across the water. Shadows stretched long across the plain. The lion's eyes glowed amber in the fading light. The river murmured softly, as if to remember the battle. And as the world turned golden, one truth lingered in the air: the wild is cruel, but it is also bound by an unspoken mercy. The camera would lift here, rising slowly above the resting pride. Over the vast sweep of the choke, the lions lay like scattered embers on the pale sand, the river curling beside them in silent motion. In the final frame, the cub stirred, stretching its small leg, pressing its head against its mother's chest. The pride remained still, guarding the water's edge, while the sun set beyond the acacia trees, a world of survival, tenderness, and quiet tears beneath a burning sky.